The air was not air anymore. It was a dense, vibrating soup of heat, grit, and the metallic temps of burnt. Jocks tasted pulverized concrete with every ragged inhale. He lay flat against the crumbling parapet wall of the third-story rooftop, his left forearm pressed hard against the receiver of the M4, soaking up the heat radiating from the barrel. The light was fading rapidly, the caustic orange glow of sunset mixing poorly with the sickly green wash of the PVS-31's night vision goggles. Below, the narrow alley, the designated extraction point Alpha PA, was a choke point nightmare. He was waiting for the sound, not the continuous chatter of the AKs or the distant roar of the circling MH-60, but the single, distinct clack that meant only one thing. Whiskey 1, be advised. The voice of control, calcine vulture sliced through the earpiece static. Unnervingly calm, enemy fire's element is confirmed to have established firing positions east, range estimated 75 meters. Targeting EPI, 75 meters. That was too close. The mortared team had them bracketed. Jocks didn't need Vulture to tell him the coordinates. He could hear the wet, sickening sound of the tube being loaded nearby, somewhere behind the ruined mosque. The sound was immediately followed by the high-pitched, almost musical hiss of the first round leaving the muzzle, arcing high into the twilight. It wasn't aimed at the SEALs. It was aimed directly at the people they were trying to extract. The whistle descended, growing into a scream. Sulu Red! Sulu Red! Vulture's voice suddenly abandoned its practiced composure, shattering into pure, raw panic. Abort the package. I repeat, Whiskey 1. Abort extraction immediately. Exfil green men only. Get out. Get out. Now. The abort code Zulu Red was the final, absolute order. It meant overwhelming enemy contact, catastrophic risk level, and mandated immediate withdrawal, regardless of weather. The primary mission objective, the package of 11 lives, was secured. Jocks's vision narrowed, focusing only on the alley mouth 50 meters below where Lieutenant Hayes, leading Bravo element, was trying to shepherd 11 terrified, stumbling civilians, NGO workers, doctors, engineers, towards the quickly shrinking safety of the LZ. They were perhaps 20 feet from the designated pickup spot. The mortar struck 5 feet from the alley entrance. The concussion hit Jocks like a physical fist, knocking the air from his lungs. The dust cloud erupted, turning the twilight toxic gray. A high, terrified shriek ripped through the air, quickly smothered by the secondary impacts of shrapnel against stone. The scream wasn't from a SEAL. Jocks had 3.2 seconds before the next mortar round, which would be adjusted closer, potentially eliminating the entire extraction zone and all 11 lives. Vulture was screaming the abort code now, but the signal was breaking up, overlaid by the deafening sound of rotors nearing a danger-close position. Get out. Safe. The team. Jocks tasted the grit and blood, unsure if the blood was his or just the humidity mixed with the metallic particulate that coated everything in this miserable city. In this suffocating chaos, where the laws of physics and time seemed to break down, what was the singular, silent, defining point of isolation that separated safety from survival? Where, in this hurricane of violence, did the silent witness stand? He ignored the ringing in his ear and the frantic, broken orders. His eyes, trained for the instant analysis of threats, focused on a secondary, more immediate problem unfolding at the mouth of the alley. The flash of a heavy machine gun. The man beneath the dust and the tactical gear was Chief Petty Officer Jocks Riley, Calcine Wrench, Alpha Element Leader, SEAL Team 3. He was 37 years old, too old for this level of sustained, close-quarters terror, and he felt every second of it in the deep, constant ache of his left knee. Jocks wasn't a reckless operator. He was known for his cold, meticulous adherence to procedure. But procedure, right now, was trying to murder 11 civilians who had trusted the promise of American safety. He was pinned down on the rooftop of a collapsed municipal building in Al-Makalla, Yemen. The mission was ostensibly a rapid-strike humanitarian extraction of Western non-combatants trapped when the city as tenuous ceasefire collapsed 48 hours ago. The reality was that they were surrounded by highly motivated, well-armed AKP al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula fighters who had been reinforced by heavy weapons teams overnight. The problem Vulture was seeing, and why the abort order was issued, was simple geometry. They were exposed. The ground element, Bravo, led by Hayes, was supposed to secure the package and move them 100 meters to the LZ in under 4 minutes. They were currently at minute 5, and the enemy knew exactly where the exfiltration was happening. The high ground and the rooftops they held were becoming death traps. Jocks had 4 men spread across the 2 most vulnerable rooftops, Alpha 1 and Alpha 2. They were the overwatch, the suppression, the insurance policy. They were running critically low on 5.56 ammunition. Whiskey 1, Bravo is stuck. Hayes' voice was strained, thick with panic. We have a vehicular block. Ali is compromised. We cannot move the package. The vehicular block, that was the new critical variable that Vulture hadn't accounted for when issuing Zulu Red. Jock scanned the narrow, smoke-filled street through his optic, pulling back slightly to confirm. He found it. A beat-up, dark blue Toyota Land Cruiser, armored with crude steel plates, parked perpendicular across the alley entrance. Mounted on its roof was a DSHK heavy machine gun, spitting tracers and devastating short bursts. The technical, this wasn't some random checkpoint. The technical was crewed by professionals. It wasn't just suppressing Bravo. It was deliberately pinning the 11 civilians in a killing zone, waiting for the extraction helicopter to arrive and expose itself. The mortar silence ended. Clack. Keys. The second round was inbound. Hayes, proximity to the Technicon, Jux asked, his voice steady despite the rapid, hammering rhythm of his heart against his ribs. 0, Chief. 0. It's right on top of us. We need heavy fire, or we're going to be overrun here. I can't return fire effectively with the package this close. The second mortar round hit a brick wall opposite the Technical, collapsing the Foka into the street. The Technical's driver immediately swerved the vehicle 3 feet, ensuring the DSHK gunner had a perfectly clear field of fire down the alley mouth. Jocks saw the faces of the people below. A woman in a faded red hijab, clutching a child, a grizzled man with a medical cross embroidered on his vest. They were frozen, terrified targets. Volta came back on the line, voice staticless, but firm. Whiskey 1, your objective is team preservation. The HVT extraction window is closed. Divert to secondary LZ Delta. Repeat Delta. Abort package Zulu Red is absolute. Acknowledge. Wrench. The order was absolute. Save the team, leave the package. Jocks knew the rule. He knew the cost of defying command. It was a court-martial, potentially dishonorable discharge, and career incineration. But if he diverted now, if he acknowledged Zulu Red, those 11 lives would be extinguished in the next 60 seconds by the Technical and the subsequent mortar barrage. He had 90 seconds until the extraction bird was forced to wave off due to fuel and enemy proximity. He needed to eliminate the Technical, or the operation was a failure, and 11 people were dead. The Technical was too ill-armored for 5.56 to penetrate the engine block reliably. He needed a harder punch. A knot of icy dread tightened in his stomach, a feeling he hadn't experienced since a mission in Somalia, where he hesitated for a fraction of a second, resulting in the loss of a key asset. He wouldn't carry that weight again. The lives below seemed to draw the oxygen out of the air, pulling him into a vacuum of impossible choice. The silence on his end was deafening to Vulture. Jocks needed to act. He slid back from the parapet, moving not towards the exfil route, but towards the bulky form lying prone a few feet away, covered in netting. The Barrett M82A1 anti-material rifle. The weapon was not standard issue for an Overwatch mission. It was meant for long-ranged interdiction or destroying light armor assets miles away. But Jocks had insisted on bringing it, using the excuse of potential engagement with hardened positions. He had actually brought it for this exact moment. The unforeseen, overwhelming threat that demanded massive, immediate violence of action. He slapped the scope protectors off the Barrett. The rifle was heavy, designed to tame the colossal energy of the 50 BMG round. Handling it felt like preparing to wrestle a small elephant. His cums were still screaming, Zulu Red. Zulu Red. Wrench, what are you doing? Confirm acknowledgement of abort. Vulture demanded. Jocks keyed the mic once, confirming he heard, but didn't speak. He wasn't confirming the order, he was confirming his position. He shoved his M4 aside, swung the Barrett up, and settled the enormous chassis onto the sandbags. The rifle's length forced him to expose half his body to the hostile street, violating every rule of cover and concealment. Firing the M82 would produce a muzzle blast equivalent to a small hand grenade. A flare of fire and a sonic crack that would instantly give away his teammate's exact location to every fighter within half a kilometer. It would be a death sentence, delayed by minutes, but it would save the package. He peered through the massive glass of the rifle scope. The Technical below bathed in the dust, and the strobe of its own heavy machine gun fire filled his field of view. He didn't aim for the gunner, too unpredictable. He didn't aim for the tires, too slow. He aimed for the engine block, just above the front axle, where the armor plating looked weakest due to hasty welding. A direct hit there, especially with a specialized tungsten core round, would guarantee catastrophic mechanical failure and, hopefully, a secondary explosion from the ruptured fuel tank. Hayes' voice, raw and desperate, cut through the cums. "We're taking casualties, Chief. They're lining up the shot. We can't hold them." He consciously ignored the physiological terror, the rush of adrenaline that made his hands tremble slightly. He visualized the shot, the round tracing its trajectory, the impact. Vulture's voice turned lethal. "Wrench, I am giving you a direct, final order. Drop the weapon and retreat now. Do not compromise the integrity of the team for the package." That is an order. Defiance and Access mind went eerily quiet. The constant chatter of the AKs, the ringing in his ears, even the frantic breathing of his teammate, Miller, next to him, all faded into background noise. There was only the sight picture. The crosshairs centered precisely on the engine block. He pressed the side of his thumb against the transmit button on his PTT push. He didn't speak to command. He spoke only to Hayes. "Brava, prepare for extreme suppression. Move the package immediately following the blast. Do not hesitate. 30 seconds. Hayes. 30 seconds. Max." Then, he released the PTT button. He didn't wait for Hayes' response, or for Vulture to react to the incident. He squeezed the trigger. The world shattered. The M82 barked with an earth-shaking violence that defied the laws of small arms. The muzzle blast was a blinding, instantaneous sun flare, a concussive wave of noise and heat that felt like being hit in the face with a frying pan. The recoil slammed Jox back into the sandbags, momentarily knocking his breath away. The sound of the shot was followed 0.05 seconds later by the sickening thwack of the projectile hitting its target. The impact was immediate and spectacular. The .50 BMG round ripped through the crude steel plating and into the engine block of the Toyota Technical. There was a sound of rending metal, a flash of white-hot fragmentation, and then the sickening humph of the vehicle's fuel tank erupting. The Technical stopped firing instantly. It was replaced by a pillar of thick, black, oily smoke and fire that momentarily illuminated the entire street in a terrifying, flickering orange light. The gunner and driver were neutralized. Silence. A profound, echoing silence settled over the alley for perhaps 2 seconds, a momentary pause of pure shock on both sides. Then, hell returned with a vengeance. "Bravo, go, go." Jox screamed into his cums, scrambling back to the parapet, grabbing his M4. Below, Lieutenant Hayes needed no further prompting. The moment the Technical exploded, he shoved the 11 civilians, now eyes streaming from the smoke, but alive, into motion. They sprinted the final 50 feet toward the LZ, which was still under sporadic small arms fire. The enemy reaction was predictable, swift, and brutal. The muzzle flash from the Barrett was a beacon in the night. Every available enemy gun, especially the heavy weapons teams positioned around the mosque, immediately converged fire on Jox's rooftop. Tracers, bright, angry red lines, began stitching into the concrete around him. The air was filled with the furious buzz of incoming rounds. Miller, Jox's wingman, yelled, "We gotta move, Chief. They got us locked." A round impacted the parapet inches from Jox's head, showering him in concrete dust and pebbles. The impact stung his cheek, forcing him to duck down. He knew he had bought the package there at 30 seconds, but he had signed his team's death warrant in the process. "Cover fire, move to the stairwell," Jox ordered, suppressing the nearest window with a burst from his M4. As he moved, pulling Miller back, Vulture's voice, now dangerously controlled and cold, cut through the din. "Whiskey 1, your actions are noted. You violated a direct, code red order. You are now designated a hot priority target. Your extraction platform, Nightingale 6-1, is inbound. You have exactly 45 seconds to get to the extraction point, or we wave off permanently." They were now on the clock, running through a maelstrom they had created. Jox took around to his tactical vest, a blunt, painful impact that knocked the wind out of him. But the plate held. He pushed the pain aside, focusing on getting to the stairwell. As they cleared the rooftop and descended into the shattered building, he heard Hayes' voice, ragged with exhaustion, but triumphant. "Nightingale, Bravo is secured. 11 green men are aboard. Repeat. Package is secured. Moving to final exfil position, Jux felt a momentary, sharp triumph. The 11 were safe. The Defiant order had worked. Then, the unexpected detail hit him. Something he learned much later from a classified debriefing memo. The reason Command had been so quick to issue Zulu Red wasn't just the sheer risk to the SEAL team. The actual high-value target wasn't one of the NGO workers, but the grizzled man with the medical cross. Dr. Elias Bansay. Vance wasn't a doctor. He was the primary regional CIA operative who had defected with a crucial, encrypted hard drive detailing years of a QAP financing networks. Command knew that losing a mere 11 civilians was strategically manageable. Losing Vance and the drive was a catastrophic intelligence failure. They couldn't tell Jux the truth, that they were sacrificing 10 lives to save one, deeply vital asset, because the Cum's intercept was possible. But the irony was crushing. Jux, in his moral decision to save all 11 lives, had also, completely unknowingly, guaranteed the success of the mission's single most critical strategic element. His defiance had accidentally ensured the strategic victory Vulture was trying to salvage through brutal attrition. They burst onto the street, sprinting toward the deafening roar of Nightingale's 6-1. Ignoring the enemy fire, saturating the air behind them, the chopper lowered its ramp, the smell of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid mixing with the dust. The extraction was violent. Jux and Miller were the last ones aboard, hauled in by the flight crew as heavy caliber rounds peppered the fuselage. The moment Jux's boots hit the metal deck, the ramp slammed shut, and Nightingale's 6-1 banked hard, using maximum vertical lift to escape the kill zone. Inside the rattling cabin, the atmosphere was thick with exhaustion, adrenaline crashes, and the stench of sweat, cordite, and fear. The 11 civilians were huddled in the center of the cabin, tied down, shocked but alive. Hayes sat opposite Jux, his face smeared with soot, his eyes wide and bright with a combination of shock and gratitude. He just nodded once, a gesture that conveyed the immense debt and the unspoken acknowledgement of the rule that had been shattered. Jux peeled off his tactical helmet. The noise dropped instantly, replaced by the mechanical drone of the engines and the distant crackle of outgoing fire from the chopper's door gunners. The immediate crisis was over. The physical pain of the hit to his vest settled into a dull, throbbing ache. The silence that followed, floating high above the war zone, felt heavier than the chaos. It was the silence of consequence. A week later, Jux was sitting in a sterile, windowless room at a secure facility in Bahrain. The air conditioning was too cold, and the fluorescent light was unforgiving. He was not being debriefed, he was being interrogated. The saved lives were a footnote to the central issue: insubordination in the face of a code red aboard. His commanding officer, Captain Wells, a man whose respect Jux deeply valued, sat across from him, looking worn and old. "You understand the gravity?" Chief Wells's voice was low, betraying nothing. "Zulu Red is the rule designed to save lives. Yours. You broke the chain of command, jeopardized the entire element, and risked a $30 million aircraft." Jux simply looked at the captain. "I secured the package, sir, all of them." "You got lucky, Riley," Wells retorted, though his eyes held a strange mix of censure and admiration. "Luck is not a strategy. Defiance is not an SOP." The final verdict hung in the air. An official letter of reprimand that would kill his chances for further promotion, mandatory psychological review, and temporary reassignment. A steep professional cost, but not the court-martial he expected. The 11 lives, and crucially, the hard drive carried by Dr. Vance, made his defiance politically untouchable. Later that evening, long after the formal reprimand, Wells called Jux into his private office. Ace slid a thin, unmarked manila envelope across the desk. "This is classified, need to know only. Riley, you burn it after you read it." Jux opened the envelope. Inside was a single, heavily redacted intelligence summary from the CIA. It detailed the operations of a high-level double agent within the regional command center responsible for mission planning. The double agent had been compromised days earlier but managed to feed false intel. Jux read the crucial, unredacted line. The location of the technical Toyota Land Cruiser at Ipia was a deliberate, last-minute intelligence injection designed to pin the HVT element and force an immediate command level abort, guaranteeing the technical success. The cold realization settled in Jux's gut. The technical was not random. It was designed to be the reason for the abort order. Vulture, Wells, and Command had recognized the intel anomaly during the mission, but could UNT countermand the abort order Zulu Red without confirming the double agent's existence on an open line? They were stuck. legally bound to withdraw, knowing that withdrawal was exactly what the enemy wanted. Jack's split-second decision to defy the order and eliminate the technical was the only action that circumvented the double agent S plan. His insubordination, born of a simple, moral refusal to leave 11 people to die, was the only way the High Command could achieve strategic victory without violating their own protocols on the record. He hadn't just defied Vulture, he had unknowingly executed the only viable counter-strategy. His superiors were prevented from ordering. Jocks looked at the single page. The price of integrity was often insubordination, and the price of command was often watching a necessary disaster unfold without intervention. He burned the paper in the small, metal trash can in Wells's office. He left the office, walking back into the bright, cold hall. The silence of the base felt suffocating, heavier than the roar of the 50 calorías. He had saved 11 lives, and his career was scarred forever. But he knew, down to the marrow, that he couldn't have lived with the weight of that quiet compliance. What word remains once the noise stops and the smoke clears?